Morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Wednesday, March 16th, 2022 meeting of the Lake Havasu City Planning and Zoning Commission. Would you please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Jim Harris,
Here.
Donald Bergen, Dan McGowan, Chad Nelson,
Here.
Matthew Mitchell, Sam Levin, Gabrielle Medley,
Here.
David Diaz,
Here.
Paul Ayer,
Here.
Susanna Ballard.
Here.
Okay, and let the record reflect that I have put Mr. Lair in place of Mr. McGowan. And we don't have anybody here to fill Mr. Bergen's spot, but we do have a quorum, so we will proceed. Okay, correspondence and announcements. Mr. Morris.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you. Just to let you know that Mr. McGowan's not here today. Yesterday, he approached me in person and said he's going to have to resign from the Planning Commission effective immediately due to some family issues. So Mr. McGowan will no longer be on the Planning Commission. He's voluntarily resigned effective immediately. So we'll work on getting a replacement for another regular member. So with that in mind, our alternate members are even more important. So we're glad that when they show up and they can take place in the meetings. He did say he wants to thank the commission and everyone for all the work that you guys have done throughout the years, and he really appreciates this time he's served on the board, on the Planning Commission. I've introduced Trevor Kearns. He's a new city planner. He started about in November of this year, of last year. You may be seeing more of him at these meetings, giving presentations and whatnot. So just want to reintroduce Trevor Kearns, our current planner.
What's the last name again, please?
Kearns,
Kearns.
Kearns.
Okay, welcome, Trevor.
And finally, at the last city council meeting, they approved the retail center general plan amendment per your recommendation. That's the general plan amendment near Home Depot, between Home Depot and the shopping center. So that concludes staff's announcements. Thank you.
Okay, minutes of the last meeting. Are there any corrections, additions, deletions, anything by commissioners? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve. Mr. Diaz?
I motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Do we have a second? Ms. Medley seconds. Any further discussion on the issue? Okay, let's go ahead and place our votes.
Chad Nelson,
Yay.
motion passes 6-0.
Okay, let me start by saying that this is a public hearing and there is a structured order to the proceeding. The city staff will present each item. There will be time for the commission to ask questions of the staff, and then the applicant will have the opportunity to present their case to the commission. That being done, we will then open the proceeding to the public for their questions and input. I would ask that anyone of the public that wishes to speak limit their trips to the podium and microphone to one only. Keep all comments to less than 3 minutes and to stay on point, and do not discuss subject matter that is not pertinent to the decision being considered here today. After public testimony is taken, I will then close the public hearing and bring the motion back to the table for city staff's recommendation, discussion amongst the commission, and eventually a motion to approve or disapprove. The first item on today's agenda is ID 223212. It's a request for a preliminary subdivision plat for Alianza, is that how you say that? Alianza at 3070 and 3072 Shoshone Drive, tract 2257, block 8, lots 5 and 6, creating a 24-unit residential condominium subdivision in the residential Southgate District, which is R-SGD. Mr. Morris, your presentation, please.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you. The subject property is located on the south side of town on Shoshone Drive, just a little bit east of Melrose Drive. You'll see here in the aerial photograph. The zoning map shows the properties to the west, north, and east are all also zoned R, SGD, Residential Southgate, and are developed as multiple family or vacant lots at this point. The properties to the south across the alley that front on Maricopa Avenue are zoned Commercial Southgate District and are developed with a preparatory school and some commercial uses and some vacant lots. Here's the preliminary plat map, an enlargement of it. The site is currently vacant, but building permits have been submitted and design review is underway for this project. The proposed condominium plat will allow the units to be individually owned, and they will be part of an association along with the common portions of the development. The project includes a total of 24 units with covered parking and parcel A, which is the covered parking, shared areas, and public utility easement, and then a parcel B, which is shown as a pool and pool house. The project will have a property owners association to manage and maintain the association improvements, and parcels A and B will be privately owned, and the water and wastewater within the subdivision will be installed and maintained by the association. That concludes staff's presentation. Open any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions of staff by commissioners? Anybody at all? Okay, hearing none, is the applicant present? Please come forward and state your name for the record.
Lee Johnson with APL Surveying. Morning, Commissioners. Luke explained everything about the project. Just here to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Anybody have any questions of the applicant? Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Appreciate it. Okay, this is a public hearing, so I'll now open it up to the public. Is there anybody in the public that wishes to speak? Anybody pro or con? Hearing none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing portion and bring it back to the table for staff's recommendation.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, thank you again. Based on the findings, the Development Review Committee recommends approval of Land Use Action 22-3212, a preliminary subdivision plat for Alianza at 3070 and 3072 Shoshone Drive, Tract 2257, Block 8, Lots 5 and 6, creating a 24-unit residential condominium subdivision in the Residential Southgate District. Thank you.
Okay, we are at the table for discussion and or a motion, Commissioners. Anybody? Ms. Ballard?
Yeah, I'd like to motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Ballard and a second by Mr. Nelson to approve action item 22-3212. Any further discussion on the item? Hearing none, let's call for the question. Place our votes.
Mr. Nelson?
Yay.
Motion passes 6-0.
Okay, congratulations. Second item on today's agenda is ID 323213. This is a request for a preliminary subdivision plat for Site 6 at Palisades at 2830 Palisades Drive, Tract 2226, Block 2, Lot 16, creating a 4-unit residential condominium subdivision in the limited multifamily R3 district. Mr. Morris, your presentation.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you. Here's the area map for the property. It's located in the north and central area of town on Palisades Drive, just west of Simatan Drive. And here's Kiowa Boulevard North to give you a little more reference. The subject property is zoned R3, multiple family. The surrounding, the lots on either side of it and across Palisades Drive to the north are also zoned R3. The lots are a mix of vacant lands and residential projects. The property to the south across the alley is zoned North Kiowa Overlay District and is developed with a mix of commercial uses and vacant lots. The subject preliminary plat is shown here. The units are currently under construction. The proposed condominium plat will allow the units to be individually owned and will be part of an association along with the common portions of the development. This project includes 4 residential units with covered parking, garages, and then parcel A, which is shared area and public utility easement. Project will have a property owners association to manage and maintain the association improvements, and parcel A will be privately owned, and the water and wastewater within the subdivision will be installed and maintained by the association. That concludes staff's presentation. Open to any questions. Thank you.
Any questions of staff by commissioners? Okay, hearing none, is the applicant present? Please state your name for the record again.
Lee Johnson, APL Surveying. Once again, Mr. Morris did a wonderful job explaining the project. 4-unit complex over there on Palisades. Here to answer any questions if you have them.
Any questions of the applicant by commissioners? Mr. Diaz?
Yes, are these sizes of the garages? Can you give me an idea what the garage sizes are going to be? Please.
There are actually larger garages on these. Actually, they're all pretty much the same size. They're roughly 15 by 40 to 42 deep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions of the applicant? Okay, thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you.
Once again, this is a public hearing. If there's anybody in the audience that wishes to speak on this item, now is the time to do so. Anybody pro or con? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing portion, bring it back to table for staff's recommendation.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you. Based on the findings, Development Review Committee recommends approval of Land Use Action 22-3213, a preliminary subdivision plat for Site 6 at Palisades at 2830 Palisades Drive, Tract 2226, Block 2, Lot 16, creating a 4-unit residential condominium subdivision in the limited family R3 district. Thank you.
Okay, we are at the table for discussion and or a motion. Commissioners? Anybody?
Jim, if I may interject a little bit, can we explain why this is? So I guess this would be a question for Luke. Why is this coming before the commission?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you. The reason this is coming before the commission is this is a single lot, and in order to divide it up to sell the individual units, it needs to go through the subdivision process. In this case, the condominium subdivision process. So if someone were to own this property out by itself with the building, they could rent out those units or lease out those individual units. But if they're going to offer the individual residential units for sale, then they have to go through the condominium process. And that's what they're opting to do in this case.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Nelson?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to point it out for everybody because I think you'll be seeing more of this. It's kind of a interesting way to get more density. We've seen condo plats like this come through the commission for years and years and years. Usually it's like a 2-bedroom, 2-bath type deal with a small garage. This is more of a large RV garages in every unit. It makes the entering of the property a little strange, but it does provide more density and more of what the market is asking for. So I just wanted to point it out for the commission that we might be seeing more of these coming in the near future.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of staff by commissioners? All right, then we are at the table for discussion and or a motion. Mr. Lair.
Yeah, I make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
I second.
I'll second.
We have a motion to approve by Mr. Lair, as second by Ms. Ballard, to approve action item number 22-3213. Any further discussion on the item? Hearing none, let's call for the question. Place your votes.
Mr. Nelson?
Yay.
Motion passes 6-0.
All right, once again, congratulations. The next item on today's agenda is ID 22-3209. This is a request for multiple text amendments to Lake Havasu City's Code, Title 14, Zoning Development Code, to revise setback requirements in the residential Southgate District and Island Body Beach District, remove dwelling multifamily from R2 district, prohibit the display of cannabis products and graphics visible from business exterior, revise R/M district standards to allow building height up to 30 feet adjacent to single-family zoning, clarify encroachment of habitable shade providing features into front property line, revise non-commercial message sign standards to allow 71 days prior to a primary election, and clarify Board of Adjustment consists of 7 regular member and revised meeting times. Mr. Morris.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for
That is
that
a
lengthy.
conglomerate of stuff.
Thank you for that lengthy introduction. Just a little background of why we're doing this, why we're asking to come forward with these code changes. It's been over 6 years since the development code was adopted in 2016. Throughout that time, in that time frame, there's been multiple corrections and updates or tweaks to the code. Just during the course of staff going through the development code, we find there's little things here and there that really should be changed to make it work better. And so periodically we find it's necessary to make those sorts of corrections. These types of amendments have occurred throughout the life of the 2016 development code. Changes have been made in 2017, 18, and 2019. And this agenda item proposes just some additional changes affecting 9 different code sections. So I'll briefly go over them here, and then we can, if you have questions about them specifically, certainly we can delve into and dive into more detail. In your packet, there was also a document that showed the proposed changes with any new language underlined in red and any struck out language lined through and in red. So with that, I'll go through the 9 proposed changes. There's a table, residential Southgate dimensional standards, that corrects the side setback from 10 feet to 3 feet. That looks like it was something when the consultant did that table, they just copied and pasted the wrong information. It's always been 3 feet for other things, like residential Southgate is very similar in some respects to the other higher density residential, and they have 3-foot side yard setbacks as opposed to that 10-foot. Item number 2 here, in the Island Body Beach District, in that table referenced here, table 2-23, it shows a 10-foot setback when really it should be a 20-foot setback. It was a typo among the tables that when the consultant put together that development code. And then item number 3, that's the permitted uses table, table 3-1. It shows as allowing multiple family dwellings in R2 zoning district. And R2 is meant for 2 maximum dwelling units. And so it shows as the letter P there, which means it's permitted, which it really shouldn't be, because our multiple family is more than 2 units. So that's just straight out a typo, and so it needs to be fixed. Item number 3 is for marijuana businesses. To meet the state code a few years ago, we had to add some marijuana business sections to our code. This adds additional language that disallows the display of cannabis and cannabis products or graphics visible from the business exterior. And then item number 4 is that table 4.01-1. It's standards for the RM zoning district. It corrects the allowed building height to be 30 feet when adjacent to single-family residential zoning. The building height previously has always been 30 feet for RM, which used to be called R4. It used to be called R4. It's now called RM. It's always been 30 feet in height. And it was somehow reduced to 18 feet in height when adjacent to single-family residential. Now, I kind of liken this to, let's say you have RE zoning district, residential estates, which allows 30 feet in height. They can, if they're allowed to go 30 feet in height when they're adjacent to R1, single-family residential, and they've always had that right. And the RM is likewise very similar. It's 30 feet in height. And there are a number of larger RM lots that are adjacent to single-family residential. So if those are limited to 18 feet in height, single story, then that really diminishes the value, I think, of the development potential of those lots if they can't go 30 feet. So this brings it back and puts it in line with the previous development code and in line with what we do with RE zoning. And then item number 6 is dimensional standards for another table for the island body beach. Again, it corrects the front yard setback to 20 feet. It was, for whatever, in that island body beach, in this specific table, at one point, island body beach and agricultural preservation zonings were combined, and they were going to call that a new zoning designation called conservation preservation. And when those two things, those two base zonings were combined, they used a 50-foot setback for that. And then they came to figure out they were going to uncombine them. They weren't going to go forward with creating that new conservation district. And so they pulled them back apart, and they neglected to put the body beach back to the 20-foot setback as was previously approved for the body beach district. And then item number 7 is exceptions for encroachments into a front yard. Right now, it reads, non-habitable shade-providing features may encroach 5 feet into the front yard from the setback. So in a single-family residential setback, it's normally a 20-foot setback for a residential, so it could encroach 5 feet for a shade-providing structure. So that would mean 15 feet from the front property line. Now, we have some zoning districts, including the manufactured home zoning district and the RUMS, RSGD, and the other residential UMS. Those also have a front setback of 10 feet. So in those cases, if we allow 5-foot encroachment into the front setback, those structures could be as close as 5 feet to the front property line, which puts them really close to that property. And it seems more appropriate to have that set back a little more, especially in the cases of those residential, higher density residential districts where we're looking for a 10-foot landscape buffer at the first 10 feet of the property also. So it helps to allow the structure to be up close 10 feet from the front property line, but we're not looking for those types of shade providing structures to be as close as 5 feet to the front property. That seems excessive. Item number 8 is non-commercial message signs. The Arizona State Code, this specifically deals with putting out election signs for running for offices or different sorts of ballot measures. The state code recently changed. It was 60 days before the primary election. Now it's 71 days, literally an odd number before the election. So we're just changing our code to come in line with the state code with 71 days. And then item number 9 is the Board of Adjustment. It's just clarifying. It doesn't list or say in our Board of Adjustment section how many regular members there are. There have always been 7 members that we can come up with. So we want to make sure it's just codified that it consists of 7 members. And it changes the meeting time from 6 p.m. to 9 a.m. And that's more in keeping with like our group here. The Planning Commission meets in the morning and 9 a.m. The Board of Adjustment doesn't meet as often as it used to because of some changes that we've made to processes. So changing their meeting time from 6 p.m. to 9 a.m. will not be a huge impact on the Board of Adjustment, we feel. And it also is similar to what we do with the Planning Commission. So that's a brief synopsis of those 9 different items. Be happy to discuss them in more detail. Thank you.
Any discussion by commissioners about any of these items? They all look pretty straightforward to me.
Luke,
Mr. Diaz.
I have
Mr. Diaz first.
go ahead.
And this might be something that council might be able to answer. So on number 8, the question has come up is on my private residential property, can someone, right now put up election signs in front of their home? That's the question that's been asked. Or does it have to be 71 days prior? I think number 8 is referring to businesses or where you're allowed to put up signs.
It's more the right of way.
Yeah. But if someone has their private residence, can they put up a sign right now for a candidate?
Ms. Gary, can you address that?
Looking at the development code, if you don't mind, under that section, It says signs containing non-commercial messages shall be allowed in all zoning districts in accordance with the following. And then the first one, here's duration, which is signs shall not be erected earlier than 60 days, is what it reads now, so 71 days prior to an election, and shall be removed within 15 days after the primary or special election. So reading that, it sounds to me like that's in all zoning districts.
Say that again, it's all,
That sounds like it's saying they shall be allowed in all zoning districts in accordance with the
So that
following.
would be residential
So
also.
that would include
Yeah.
all zoning districts within the city.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
okay, Mr. Nelson, did you have a question?
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the R2 district. Currently, what I'm seeing in the table is that you can have more units on an R2 lot, 7 units per acre. So explain to me what we're changing here and if that changes that.
All right, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, what we're asking to change in that item number 3 here is in the permitted uses table. So that's the matrix, so like the spreadsheet that shows the different types of uses across the top, across the side, and the zoning districts across the top, and you cross-reference those. So right now, it's saying that multiple family is allowed in R2. So multiple family is more than 2 units, 3 or more units. And the R2 zoning district only supposed to allow a maximum of 2 units. So this is just removing that permitted use indicator from the table, from the permitted uses table, and leaving it blank, which indicates that use is not allowed. So all this is, it's not changing any development standards for R2. It's just removing it as the multiple family as a permitted use from the permitted uses table in the R2 zoning district. Does that make sense?
But in the articles, the zoning districts, R2, it does show 7 dwelling units per acre.
Well, that would be the maximum you could have would be 2 units on there. So if you have a small lot, it's going to be 2 units is the maximum. I mean, large lot, small lot, units per acre. That's just a number in there. The 7.5 number would be like a density. So if we're looking at how many, let's say you have a 1/4 acre lot, you're going to take 1/4 of 7.5. Anyone really good at math? Let's say it was 8. 1/4 of 8 would be 2 units. So it's really saying that's the average density you would have on a normal R2 lot. So
I think what excuse me, I think where Mr. Nelson's coming from is we need some further clarification because that could be misconstrued that we allow 7.5 units on an R2 property, which is not the case.
well, that's
Well,
good way to put it.
yeah,
The
clarify.
table is
If-
units per acre there. And we're not asking to change anything with that. We're leaving that the way it is. What we're asking for in this point, and it's something we can come back and discuss at length if you like, but at this point, we're looking at just the permitted uses table and what's
Right.
allowed there. So we can certainly come back with further discussion if you like about amending that portion of the R2.
Well, just clarification, probably.
Well, let's say I have a 1/2 acre lot. I'm going to want to put, and it's R2. I'm going to want to put, 3 dwelling units there, instead of just 2. And I don't see any issue with that.
Well, that density unit, number of units per acre, you would still have to meet the other requirements of the development code. And one of the requirements of that zoning district, or limitations, is 2 units maximum.
2 units only.
Now, you could also theoretically take advantage of accessory dwelling unit. You could have an accessory dwelling unit on that property, the R2 lot. So you could have 2 full-size units and 1 accessory dwelling unit, which is allowed in all the residential districts. So that would get you 3 units, but not officially. It'd officially be 2 units and 1 accessory dwelling unit.
But that accessory dwelling unit may not be rented out separate to the other 2.
On our current development code, yes, it can be in this. That's something that was updated with the development code change.
Interesting. Mr. Lear.
Yeah, just a question. Would this come more into play if you're going to subdivide a larger parcel? Would having that density unit in there help, or?
Well, it would still remain the 7.5 units per acre, regardless of the size of the lot. The density would be 7.5 units per acre, and the maximum number of full units could be only 2 on the R2 lot. So again, we're just asking to remove that R3 or that multiple family designation from the allowed uses in the R2 zoning district.
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking if I had like a 1 acre parcel that was in an R2 lot and I wanted to, pare it down into 4 parcels instead.
Split the lot.
Yeah, does this help support that type of modification?
You could certainly, this change we're contemplating right now with the permitted uses table wouldn't have any effect on the splitting the lot and the number of units per acre, but you could certainly, if you had a large enough lot and it met the requirements for the minimum lot sizes for R2 lot, you could certainly split a lot and create 2 units on each new lot.
Mr. Nelson, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it just, it's going to be confusing if you're reading the permitted uses table and and if you go over to our zoning districts in both the development code, and it's both in the development code, the zoning districts and the permitted use table. So I think it might be confusing to people if you're trying to, if I'm sitting with the client and showing them the use table and the zoning districts, they're going to think that if they have an acre lot, that they're going to be able to build 7 dwellings.
Except for the verbiage that says 2 units only. Mr. Tuneman, do you have a question or a statement?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Jeff Tuneman. I think the best way to look at this is there's multiple areas in the code that address certain things like setbacks, units per acre. You have to look at this as it's another table that you have to look at how many dwelling units are allowed in that zone. So the way to look at that is that this is more restrictive than the 7 units per acre section. So you always, when you're designing, you always have different multiple sections of a code that you have to read, and usually the most restrictive applies. I think that might help clarify that's what this table is okay, we can do 7 units per acre, but this table says, well, you're only allowed 2 in the R2 zone. So to Paul's point, Mr. Lear's point, you have an acre, you want to do 4 lots out of that, and you can zone it R2 as long as you meet the minimum lot dimensions. And you could, since you have 4 lots now and you call them R2, you could have 2 units on each one of those 4 lots, which would be 8 units. So,
but you would have to go through that lot split
correct
procedure
just kind
ahead
of what
of time.
we've seen earlier today.
Right.
Similar to that.
Just point of clarification.
So hopefully that just helps clarify.
Okay. Are you good, Mr. Nelson?
Yeah, I guess just a little bit of further discussion with the commission. I'm seeing that some people who have, say duplexes that they purchased years ago or that were built in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and they've got room to build accessory structures in the back, and that provides more density for our town, and they would meet all the parking requirements and everything else that they need for these accessory buildings that could provide housing. Luke, what kind of guidance would we give them, or would you give them in that scenario where they could, meet these requirements where it says up to 7 dwelling units per acre, and they could build additional structures to provide housing?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you. I think we've already established that what we're asking for here is this code change to limit to 2 units. The R2 does not allow multiple family, which is 3 or more units. So I'd have to see what you're talking about. I think we're getting a little bit off topic here. We're talking about other things, but I would certainly something we could look at on a case-by-case basis and see if it's something that requires a rezone or whatever to allow whatever number of units they're proposing for a certain property. Again, I think we're getting a little afield of what we're looking for today's meeting. Be happy to sit down with you, Chad, at some point and go over some different thoughts on that if you like. But It's something I can't really give you an educated answer right now because I'm not aware of what all is going on. The most I could say is they could be allowed to do an accessory dwelling unit in the residential zoning district. Thank you.
Okay. You wouldn't advise them to maybe go for a rezone or do a PD on it?
I'd want to consult with them and see what the options are. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further discussion on the issue? Ms. Ballard, did you have something?
No, thank you.
Well, we are at the table for a discussion and or a motion to approve or disapprove or whatever. Ms.
Sorry.
Medley?
I would like to make a motion to approve ID 223209.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Medley, a second by Ms. Ballard to approve ID, I'm looking for the number here, I lost it, 22-3209 as written. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I did that once. Any further discussion on the item? Okay, let's go ahead and place our votes.
Mr. Nelson,
Nay.
motion passes 5-1.
Okay, moving forward, the last item on today's agenda is ID 22-3211. Review and discuss revising the development standards for the residential Uptown Main Street, which is R-UMS, and residential commercial health, which is R-CHD, multifamily districts. Mr. Morris, your presentation.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you. Just a little background and recap. This is an item the Planning Commission heard at the previous meeting. Staff initiated this request to review and discuss the development standards for the RUMS and RCHD multiple family zoning districts. One of the intents of this district was to improve these districts and to provide medium to high density residential development along the portions of Mesquite and Swanson Avenues parallel to McCulloch and basically the Main Street area of town. The districts currently allow multiple level building heights of up to 42 feet with no residential density maximum. Another of the original objectives of these districts was to create a more walkable Main Street area by encouraging developments that have a pedestrian connection to Main Street with buildings designed with front doors, porches, and stoops facing the street. Some recent developments and proposals within these zoning districts are not really realizing the vision of how these areas were intended to develop. They're not really taking advantage of the increased building height and density allowed in these areas. Again, on February 16th, the Planning Commission reviewed and discussed the development standards for these districts. And at the end of the discussion, the Commission asked staff to provide some proposed revised development standards, including potential changes to topics such as density, minimum number of building stories, and building and development form standards. So based on the Commission's direction, staff has proposed 4 potential amendments. The first one is to add a minimum density for units per acre. There's currently no minimum density in these zoning districts, the residential UMS and residential Southgate. Previously, the highest density district was multiple family residential RM, which used to be called R4. And in the RM district, it had a density range of 10 to 20 units per acre, and it still does. The RM has a 10 to 20 units per acre density range. The residential UMS and residential commercial health district are intended to be the highest density districts within the city. So staff suggests that those districts, the RUMS and the RCHD, should have a minimum density of at least 15 units per acre, which is higher than the 10 units per acre that the RM has, and then have no maximum density for those 2 zoning districts. Another potential amendment is require a minimum of 2 levels where sufficient building height allows. Those added levels will provide opportunity for increased density by providing additional units above or having 2 stories that are closer together. A third potential amendment is require architectural enhancements for the portions of the structures facing the right-of-way. Building walls over 20 feet long facing the right-of-way should be broken up with some sort of architectural enhancements, such as pop-outs, decorative stone, non-habitable porches or stoops, etc. These types of enhancements will help soften the buildings and create a more pleasant streetscape for the downtown area. And then the fourth potential amendment the staff's suggesting is require a pedestrian link to the street. By that I mean any door facing the right-of-way should have a sidewalk directly linking the residents to the street. So in those districts, they're within a block of McCulloch commercial areas, which there's lots of services, offices, things for people to use businesses in those areas. And a human-scaled sidewalk connection will help encourage residents to walk to destinations within that area, thus reducing traffic and commercial parking on McCulloch Boulevard. So try to make it a more of a connection, human-scale pedestrian connection to the street and to the downtown. That concludes my presentation, but we encourage the commission to discuss these proposals and offer additional standards. We're asking for direction how to move forward. Based on the outcome of this meeting, staff will come back with specific development code changes as directed by the commission. So with that, open any discussion you may have. Thank you.
Okay, we are at the table for discussion. And I want to start by going back to my original concerns when we discussed this the last time. What'd you say, Mr. Diaz? Okay. I have a hard time with requiring, the word require. Maybe allow, heavily suggested. You know, this is where we want to go, but I have a hard time with requiring property owners to do something that is something that's relatively new and a little more restrictive than what they might have been anticipating. So that's my comment. I do agree that that's where we want to go, but concerned about those previous private property rights. Anybody else?
Yeah. Yes.
Mr. Diaz.
So I agree with that, and getting back to Mr. Lair's comment from the last time we talked about this is, you know, how do we tighten up maybe an architectural review part of it? Do we highly recommend, and then does that hold any, meat on the bone? So it's interesting because some people are going to say we don't our finances don't even match up with what you guys are requiring us to do, so we're just going to keep a lot undeveloped. So there's a lot of questions still, I think.
Mr. Lair.
Yeah, I think just one slightly different topic, I guess, which is the, thanks, Jim, the max, the minimum building height of being 2 stories. Just wondering if there should be some consideration for maybe a percentage where you could have a lower percentage would be, say, a single story, and then like 60% of it would have to be 2-story, just to encourage sort of breaking up, just a monolithic height. I don't know if that would even help be a compromise to some of the,
Might be.
Jim's concerns.
I think that's a good compromise.
Mr. Nelson?
Yeah, I think that's a good compromise. And I'm all for having the street connection, and I'm all for having, even if it's a garage. I mean, some of the units that are going up, it's a garage, but you could still make it look like the front of a house, and maybe the man door to the garage looks like the front door, So I think it's achievable. And I think that's a good compromise, 50 or 60% of the dwelling units to be 2-story or higher.
Anybody else? Comments? Now, we are not at the table here for a motion, correct? This is just a discussion item.
This is a discussion item. So based on the discussion and the direction of the commission, staff will then put together another meeting agenda item for you that deals specifically with the code changes. So that would be like the previous item we just heard, where we were looking at specific code changes, and then you would review that and then make a recommendation, then that would go on to the city council. So we anticipate, based on your direction, we hopefully would be able to get a code change amendment to you in the second meeting of next month. And then based on what you recommend moving forward, go to the city council. So next month is April. So April meeting, your second meeting in April, we would figure you would have those specific changes, and then you would make a recommendation that would go on to city council in their second meeting in May is the way it theoretically should work out at this point. So you're right. At this point, we're looking for direction, and we will come back with the specifics in a month or so.
Luke, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're really trying to get these units to be 10 feet off the sidewalk too, right? With you got your sidewalk landscaping, and then a sidewalk going to the front porch. That's what we're looking for as far as design review, correct?
Correct. These are set up as a 10-foot build-to line setback. So we're looking for 60% of the lot frontage to have the building at 10 feet from the front property line. The idea is to have more of a human connection to the street, and in conjunction with the front doors and the paths, sidewalks leading for human use to the street to encourage that pedestrian connection and pedestrian feel for the area.
But still requiring the 20 to 25 foot setback for any garage or automobile storage.
That's correct.
If it's facing the street.
That's facing the street, correct?
Yes, the idea in these districts is to encourage the parking to be to the side and or rear of the property. The front of the property is more encouraged to be the building facing the street, not garages facing the street.
Something else we might consider for design review is that, air conditioners and things of that nature aren't placed in that 10 foot, 10 foot off the street, or at that side. If it's the side of the building or the front of the building, the air conditioners and other, utilities like that aren't visible from that area.
Can I ask another question?
Mr. Diaz.
So Luke, when they, one of the newer projects that I think it was completed last year was it's like a single story. I think it's a fourplex. The rear doors are facing the street. It goes against everything that you guys saying you're trying to get going. What the spirit of these codes, what you want to happen. When that came up to city planning and zoning and the departments, and you guys saw the original plans, how did that conversation go? I mean, because it was built completely different from what we're trying to accomplish here. I mean, did we suggest to the builder that, well, we want to get 2-story, we'd like to see more porches, and I mean, it's everything opposite of what we're trying to do here.
Well, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you for that question. That's an example of what the development code allows.
Yeah.
There's nothing in there that staff could say, nope, you can't do this. This is not allowed. So if we have something in the language that makes it more clear and more enforceable that here's the standards, then it's much easier. Staff has much more weight in saying, well, you need to make these changes because here's the code. There is some leeway, some latitude in some design stuff, but if it's there in the books codified, we have much more of something to point to and say this is what it needs to be. So that's one of the reasons we're looking to get more clarification in the current designations for these zoning districts.
But that particular project, and correct me if I'm wrong, that qualified to do what they did without having to come before this commission or a design review process.
That's correct. The city doesn't require design review to be done by the planning commission or the city council. It's a staff-handled matter. And that project met all the requirements. So staff had really no option other than to approve it. It wasn't the best looking design. I'll admit that, but it's an example, unfortunately, that we can use. That's something that we'd rather, a lot of people would see that as less attractive than other types of designs.
Well, from my perspective, once again, I would suggest that we soften that requirement aspect somehow with the verbiage and not take away the ability for somebody who had other plans. Encourage them to do what we want to happen down there. But I still take exception to that requirement aspect.
Jim?
Ms. Ballard.
However, if you reduce that from inquired to encouraged, that would allow anyone who is not encouraged to move forward without making any modifications at all.
Well, but like Mr. Diaz said, or they just say, well, the heck with it, I'll just leave the lot blank, not develop it.
Well, they wouldn't need to leave the lot blank if it was encouraged but not required.
True.
Well, Jim, how do you feel about the 60%? Do you feel that's a compromise?
50%, and clarify again, the 50%.
So the building height of 50% or 60% or more of the dwellings to be 2-story or higher. So you have a mixture of single-story and 2-story or higher.
I don't have a problem with that.
Okay. I think that's kind of the direction that is a good direction to move.
Mr. Tuneman, did you have something else to add?
Yes. You know, there's always an option that is available in all zoning districts. It's called the Planned Development District, which is a way to ask for exceptions from the underlying zoning district. So that could be an option. Let's say this gets approved and we require a certain number of stories or certain architectural details and whatnot. If someone has come forward with a project that they feel they're going to ask for some exceptions, then it goes through the rezoning process, same as any other rezone, and they could submit a planned development rezone based on a specific site plan and building elevations, and it would come before the Planning and Zoning Commission as a recommending body like any rezone, and then Planning Commission could make a recommendation that would go on to the City Council, and the City Council will ultimately decide whether this project warrants or merits exceptions to the development code. So that could be a way for someone to do something. Let's say they had their heart set on a single story and it was beautiful, but our code doesn't allow it. Then that could be a process to go through to allow that sort of development.
Still a crapshoot, though, at that point. It may be denied.
Yep. It's
So
a possibility.
again, I have a problem with taking away some existing rights. Mr. Lear, you have a comment.
Yeah, just a thought. Has the Planning Commission ever been part of the design review process? I mean, I know on planned developments, we are, or I believe we are. I might be, maybe old history here, sorry. But would we ever just want to provide just some sort of, I don't even know if it's a non-binding design review, just so it's brought forward to the commission, any type of development in these zones, to provide some level of input, even if it isn't like a binding comment.
I think that that's kind of always been the position of staff, to provide that direction when they come to the counter, at their first application. But I don't think it's something that would be necessary, another step for somebody to, hoop for somebody to jump through.
At this point, the city does not require design review be performed by the Planning Commission or City Council. It's performed by staff. I think years ago, especially with any larger developments, they all required planned developments, and they required design review even at the City Council level, I believe. That was a number of years ago, 10 years ago or more. That hasn't happened for a while. The code was changed to get away from that, so it's more design review is by staff at this point. If there is a planned development rezone and there's specific architectural elevations and things that are associated with that rezone, then that's kind of per se design review by Planning Commission and City Council, because they're approving that architectural elevation and that site plan. So that could be seen as design review. when the property developer comes in, they would have to substantially meet that approved plan. So that, you're right, that is kind of a design review on a case-by-case basis through the PD or the plan development rezone process.
Okay, any other comments?
Luke, is it possible to have a workshop with the Planning and Zoning Commission on the design review? Because I'm all for giving you, I think that we should give staff the tools so they don't have to jump through so many hoops to get these things approved. And I think that's what they're looking for is, giving them the tools. And so when these things happen, we're congruent with what we want or what's best for the city. And when something not so attractive pops up, they don't get the finger pointed at them. So I'm all for, taking a look at the design review process, helping Luke and staff and helping them with making a final decision. So, they've got more tools so they can pass these things or make recommendations a little easier.
Well, and that's what we're doing here with this, refining these, these 4 items. In essence, giving them more tools to work with. So, any other discussion? Ms. Medley.
I have a question. So if we went with what you were saying about giving an option of a percentage, how do you implement something like that?
It's a good question. It's something that staff would have to analyze and come up with some sort of verbiage or guidelines.
We have to fine tune that, maybe square footage of the units or square footage of the development that's under construction. That's a good point, and it's something we would want to have some fine tuning on, and we would come back to the Planning Commission with our proposal, and then at the next meeting, well, not next meeting, but in next month, and then with proposed language, and we could tweak that language at that meeting, and then it would go on to the city council, and then they could even tweak it further if they wanted to. So as long as we get direction from the Planning Commission, we can put together some proposed language for the code changes, for the changes to the code, and then you'll have an opportunity, of course, to review those when it comes before you as a recommending body.
I think that, from my perspective, I think that some of what we're talking about is going to be a moot point, because other than that one development that, we've all referenced, the single-story development, these properties are now at a value that the highest and best use is going to be to go vertical. And chances are that's what's going to happen. So it's probably kind of a moot point, but I appreciate you guys wanting to tie it down.
And if I may interject here, in discussions we've had recently with developers, it seems from their standpoint on a cost for return, they get their cost back much quicker on a 2-story versus a 3-story. 1-story, obviously, it's cost less, they can get their money back quicker, but 2-story is still workable from what we've been hearing. 3 stories, it's a longer time frame for them to get their return on their investment. So I think hopefully there'll be more support for 2-story. I don't think we would want to have requirements higher than that at this point, but again, it's up to the Planning Commission to give us direction, and we'll come back with what based on your direction.
Okay, thank you. All right. The next item on the agenda would be the call to the public. Is there anybody in the public that wishes to speak to the commission on any item whatsoever? Come forward, state your name for the record. Please understand that we may not comment back. So you can say anything.
Thank you, Maria. I'm Marcella Lair. I'm actually commenting to the last presentation to the commission, Mr. Chairman. The one thing I did not see, was there any green space that you had required for the human element of the link to between the proposed development, people meandering throughout the Main Street area, even going down to the supermarket? I'm really very much in favor of developing both Swanson and Mesquite, we already have an example of a higher density on the Mesquite side below Smoke Tree. We kind of see what it looks like already, to start to see it grow and fill in. Filling it in, having both Mesquite and Swanson developed, you're going to create an economic anchor so that people that live in those units that may not be able to drive a car, for example, will be able to go to the supermarket not too far away, or be able to dine on Main Street not too far away. So it takes all the investment that has been made since 1994 on the Main Street program, and it secures it with literally an economic wall or an anchor. And so the only thing I can see from a human element standpoint is making it a little more shady for people to walk and have that human link as we develop that economic anchor to secure the businesses that are making their livelihood on Main Street. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience that wishes to address the commission? Okay, hearing none. Future meetings, Mr. Morris.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you. Yes, we have a meeting scheduled for April 6th. We do have 4 items on that agenda at this point, so we will have a meeting on April 6th. Thank you.
Okay. And that does it for today. We stand adjourned.